Hello, how have you been? It has been a while. I know I haven't posted in like a month or something. Next video will be like a channel update to talk about non-Overwatch stuff, but this time I just wanted to talk about Overwatch and do a tier list of the support heroes in Season 9, specifically after the mid-season hotfix patch. That's not really the mid-season patch because it was very quickly after the season started, so please like and subscribe at any point if you feel like it. I'm just getting right into the list, starting first with Zenyatta. Now I'm being brutally honest, I'm going to have to put him in F tier. Unfortunately for Zenyatta, he has no mobility in a hypermobile meta, and the buff to projectiles have made his already easy to hit hitbox even easier to hit, making him an incredibly weak pick right now. Especially with Tracer being incredibly strong, so you can just kinda go in and one-clip him for free with the buffs to projectile size. Nah, I'm just fucking with you, he's S tier. My doctor told me I'm not allowed to use hyperboles anymore. Apparently, he also told me that I have something called Ligma? No idea what that is, but whatever. Zenyatta goes pretty crazy right now, and even with the 25 health nerf and the nerf to kick knockback, I don't think that he will be going anywhere this season. Maybe just going from S tier to a really high A tier. Zenny right now kind of just feels like how you played Dive Zenyatta in the really early seasons of Overwatch 1, where you kind of just tried to get as much value out of Discord as possible with your team before you inevitably get dove on and nuked out of reality. But even in those situations, Zenyatta could still go down swinging and deal some damage before he dies. At least Zenyatta now feeling like old Dive Zen is something I heard from a few people that had played him in scrims earlier on in the season. Ladder is very different for the most part. In isolated 1v1s, Zenyatta can go toe-to-toe with a lot of heroes in the game. Please don't take this in a weird way. I've seen the kinds of things that people post online, and I am not very happy with them. Especially since the projectile size buffs help Zenyatta a bit more than they hurt him, as typically heroes that do have larger or easier to hit hitboxes or less mobility typically lose a bit less from the increased projectile size because they were already super easy to hit anyways. Meanwhile, for Zenyatta himself, the increased projectile size helps him massively in fights against flankers like Tracer, who are incredibly strong right now. Also in general, the new DPS passive just makes support heroes that primarily offer high healing outputs much worse, which just makes Zenyatta a hero that specializes in increasing your team's damage output a much stronger option in comparison. Which is why that even with the health nerf, he's still going to be a very strong pick due to his high natural damage output, coupled with Discord Orb are still going to give him a place in the meta, even if he has to play further back and can't live quite as easily as he could before. I have mainly played Zenyatta the last few seasons, and I thought he was fine then, and compared to the other supports, he has lost far less with the transition into Season 9, so he's still definitely going to be playable. Maybe not into everything, because it will be easier for Tracers to destroy you, because you are missing that 25 health that he had before, but you can still 2-tap Tracer, so you still have a fighting chance when fighting against a Tracer. The other thing is with the health nerf, he still got the good end of it because they took regular health instead of sealed health, and sealeds go hella hard, especially with the new support passive being nerfed a little bit, as the time for it to activate for support heroes has been increased from 1.5 to 2.5 seconds, although the healing has been increased from 15 per second to 20 per second. But for Zen in particular, he can basically go from 0 health to full health in about 7 seconds of not taking damage, with the combined healing from the global passive as well as his sealed health. It is pretty crazy. So yeah, despite the nerfs, I still think that he will be a very strong pick. You're just probably not going to be able to play him as easily with and against dive comps like you could before, because the health buff will be felt a bit more when you're trying to fend for yourself, but playing around a team in a slower team composition, he's still going to be very strong. Next up, Moira. Moira is our new god, S tier. I considered putting Moira in A, only because I know that I'm incredibly biased towards her, because I got bored and started maining Moira last season, and thought that she was good then and really underrated, and now she's even better now than she was before. In particular, Fade gives her decent survivability, and combine that with her damage buff makes her decent into flankers, who are incredibly strong right now. But more importantly, right now her healing orb is incredibly good at keeping Moira and her team alive. Last season I would have said that damage orb was almost always the better option to throw out, since using it would also restore your healing resource. letting you just chuck a damage orb towards the enemy team, so you can just hold left click and pocket heal your tank while basically losing no resource at all. It was usually more efficient to just chuck out a damage orb and heal with your primary than it would be to chuck out a healing orb and deal damage if you wanted to do that. And also using healing orb on a target that you can already heal with your primary would kind of just be overkill in a lot of situations. However, now in season 9 with the easier to hit projectiles and the DPS passive, overkill is kind of exactly what you need in order to keep your team alive. The other thing is that the higher health totals that heroes have now have made damage orb a little bit less threatening. I think that it's still going to be pretty good for the additional pressure that it applies to the enemy team. It can help soften up targets for your DPS to go get a kill on, but especially now that Squissies have 250 health and damage orb can only deal a maximum of 200 damage, it's no longer as threatening in that you can kind of tank half of the damage if you need to, and not give up your positioning in order to try and get away from the damage orb. In particular, right now, Moira goes incredibly hard in the Lucio comp, as you can kind of just amp speed in, throw a healing orb, and hold left click on your team, and your team will just have so much damn health to Super Smash Bros. Brawl with. Personally, I prefer melee, but to each their own. Very good character. I think that people are starting to see just how strong having a lot of resources at your disposal are. Just for the love of God, don't tunnel vision DPS Moira. Flank supports have never been a very good playstyle. It can work if your team is just better and doesn't need the healing as much, but people playing flank KarQ was one of the biggest reasons why she had one of the lowest win rates in the entire game. Just don't play Moira like that. She's just a very good as a survivable support, so you can keep her team alive, survive well on her own with Fade, so you can reasonably press her out ranged heroes with damage orb, or use healing orb to give herself a lot of sustain and try and fight off flankers, because healing orb does heal for a maximum of 300 health, making its healing even stronger than that of Soldier's healing pad, the greatest ability to ever grace the Overwatch servers and our Lord and Savior. He has much better longevity than a lot of other supports against dive, just very strong right now, also has a very cool skin. Moving on to Mercy. No. Now on to Lucio. Just kidding. Mercy, C tier, maybe low B tier. She will feel awful to play, I guarantee it, but I think that survivability and mobility are going to be very important factors for how viable a support hero is, and Mercy does that better than most of them. Pocketing a good DPS is still going to be incredibly strong, with just how dominant the DPS role is right now. A damage boosted Ass or Cassidy can one-tap tracers with a critical, and having a good DPS to pocket can make Mercy work in a lot of cases, because Mercy helps keep the DPS alive, and then the DPS getting kills and fighting off the flankers will help keep the Mercy alive and provide protection. They kind of just work on each other as their own unit. The biggest problem with Mercy is that the meta just does not favor her at all. Any really hard, heavy, focused dive comp will still just be able to just jump on and annihilate a Mercy and her pocket, especially with the DPS passive making Mercy's already low healing even lower and making it difficult to keep her pocket alive. And it's like just a lot of really fast comps, dive comps, brawl comps. There's just a lot of Lucio going around right now in ranked. It feels like a majority of comps will either play Lucio and play fast, or play as Zenyatta and play for damage. I honestly haven't seen as much Zenyatta. I think that people are just always playing Lucio usually, and Mercy really doesn't fit too well into either of these comps. With a Zenyatta, you would more likely want a KarQ or a Baptiste for the simultaneous damage output and healing that they offer, while for Lucio comps, a Moira would work much better to provide the absurd amount of healing necessary to keep your team alive and able to brawl, while of course also having much better sustainability through Fade. And trying to play against these kinds of comps as Mercy will also usually feel pretty bad. Against a fast comp, you're probably just going to be hunted down and farmed by Tracers, Lucios, Winstons, Balls, Junker Queens, etc. And against high damage Zenyatta comps, you're just going to end up being overrun with damage because you're gonna have to be healing a lot more, and Mercy's healing is not that great. So yeah, if people are not playing hard meta comps, then I think she really does have a place in just being able to pocket a very strong DPS character, who can then just run the entire lobby. But I think that that's going to happen much less than it did before, mainly because Tracer is just miles ahead of any other DPS in the game, basically, in terms of how good they are, and Tracer doesn't really work that well with a Mercy pocket. And to add to that, the projectile buffs kind of hurt Mercy a lot more than a lot of other characters, because it's going to make it much easier to hit her when she's trying to be evasive, so you can't even just rely on your mobility to get you out of a lot of situations. You really need to be hard protected in a lot of cases, or you will die. Or you gotta play, you know, super far back, but then you kind of just lose against slow comps and then also get dove on by fast comps. I don't know. So you can still work in a lot of cases, but definitely not a character that you can force a lot in this meta, like you could maybe do before. Next up for Lucio Mafia S tier. Also probably like B tier at the same exact time. It really depends on what kind of team comp you're playing. If your team is playing a fast comp or just actually utilizing speed boost, then Lucio is absolutely amazing. If your team is not actually making good use of speed boost, then he's going to feel pretty underwhelming to play with. The thing with Lucio is that you don't need to actually have a brawl comp or a dive comp to meaningfully take advantage of speed boost. Brawl comps and dive comps will of course get much more mileage out of it, but you can even speed around a tank like Roadhog and Sigma and it will be impactful. Playing fast is just much more important now with the DPS passive and easier to hit projectiles, which just makes sustained healing much weaker. Speeding a non-brawl hero into a fight or towards an off angle just lets them take space much more easily, as they can get from point A to point B faster and take much less poke damage during the rotation. Speed boost can also be used to kite away from the enemy team if they're running a Lucio brawl comp or dive comp, or you could also use it to chase after kills and get staggers once your team gets a couple of kills in a fight. Speed boost is just an excellent tool regardless of what kind of team comp you're running, and Lucio himself also is very survivable and does decent damage on his own. Lucio just feels very fun to play with the extra health and the buff to boop, as well as the projectile buff making his damage even more consistent. And again, Boof also got turbo buffed, and he's now even better at disrupting the enemy tank if they try and do literally anything. If you see a Junker Queen ever go in to swing an axe, you can just boop her away and just deny so much value. And also, for the first time since Overwatch 1, Lucio is now able to get environmental kills. Very hype and excited for this. He's never been able to do it before this point, and I am into it because I have over 1,000 hours as Lucio, as I mained him in Overwatch 1. He will feel very fun to play, but again, if you're not actually making use of speed boost, your team will 100% suffer, because just his healing is not good. And if you're just playing, you know, Lucio 76 and just trying to hang near your team, heal them and deal damage, you'd be much better off just playing like any other character. That's kind of the reason why I think that the Moira Lucio comp goes really good, because you can basically just have the Lucio on speed boost the entire time, since Moira can easily heal for the two of them with her AoE healing and healing orb, especially if you are permanently on the speed and ending these fights very quickly. Speed boost is just very strong, because you have to play very fast since you can't just sustain through stuff anymore due to the DPS passive, and the fact that people are just going to be taking much more damage anyways because of the increased projectile size. LifeWeaver I'm putting in D tier. LifeWeaver was basically a heal bot before. He didn't even have great healing output compared to other supports. It's just that he did very little except for heal the entire game. Just as a comparison, LifeWeaver's healing output is 53.8 health per second. This is even less than Mercy's at 55, and much lower than the likes of KarQ's at 76.5 if you include the whole recovery time between when she can throw each round of healing paper, and Ana's healing per second at 93.75. And now with the DPS passive, his healing is even worse than it was before. He does still have the benefit of being very survivable with his rejuvenating dash as well as pedal platform to help get him out of danger, especially against heroes like Tracer who don't have vertical mobility. Pedal platform will be very good, but he just really doesn't offer that much outside of that to make him a good pick. Life Grip is still pretty damn good though, and can just bail allies out if they are ever in danger. Now, to get into spicy opinions, I feel like Deathweaver is a pretty unexplored concept that could actually be pretty decent with the right team composition backing it up. Don't get me wrong, I doubt that it's going to be a hard meta strategy or anything like that, but if you ever wanted to try and make Deathweaver work, now is probably the time to do it. The projectile buffs go extremely hard for his primary, and also WifeLeaver does have the highest base damage output out of any support in the entire game. The reason that I say base damage output is that technically Zenyatta's is higher if you also include the buff from Discord Orb as being part of his damage output. For reference, Zenyatta's primary damage per second is 120, which then with the 25% buff from Discord goes up to 150. Meanwhile, LifeWeaver's damage per second is 132. And with Deathweaver, you would still get the benefit of Platform, Life Grip, Rejuvenating Dash. You could still even, you know, use your healing, because if LifeWeaver ever has one of his weapons out, the other one will automatically reload after not being used for 2.5 seconds. Meaning that instead of reloading your primary, you could just swap to healing, heal for 3 seconds, then swap back to the damage, or maybe just, you know, just try and push the damage much more than you usually would on LifeWeaver. Instead of trying to pocket your tank that's going in, maybe you just go in with damage and then just life grip him out when he gets low instead. Especially if you build this around having another high healing support and just run, you know, the LifeWeaver for the life grip and his damage output and platform as well. I don't know, it's something that could work. Problem is, it would probably work the best in some kind of spam or poke comp, but both of these are really bad. Both dive and brawl are incredibly strong right now, and I think that's kind of the reason why LifeWeaver doesn't seem to work most of the time. He's also probably the hero that I've seen work the least so far in the games I've been able to play. But I don't know, maybe I'll try and put together a Deathweaver strategy for myself with some friends at some point. Next, going on to KarQ. I was a hard believer in Carry being really good and in S tier this season, primarily because he's just a character that can output a lot of healing and damage at the same time. Protects and Suzu will also cleanse the DPS passive, allowing her to do pretty good burst healing on a tank, since a single clip of healing papers will heal for 130. So you can Suzu to cleanse the DPS passive and heal for 80. As a side note, I checked and the DPS passive does not actually count as cleansing a negative status effect, so you don't get the bonus 30 healing that Suzu normally does if you cleanse a negative status effect. You only get the 80. So you Suzu, gets rid of the DPS passive, heals for 80. Then you can send a full clip of healing papers into the target to heal for another 130 that isn't impacted by the DPS passive, all for like a really big swing play. And on top of that, Swift Step gives her an escape option against dive heroes that a lot of heroes lack. However, in a lot of cases, it feels like Moira can just do the same thing with healing, or being able to just double heal a hero for 135 health per second. Fade is also just much better in a lot of situations than Swift Step is, as it gives Moira more agency over her movement than Swift Step does. Moira also offers AoE healing, which is also really good for a lot of brawl comps or for dive comps. Now, if you were running something like a Roadhog or god forbid a Reinhardt, then I do think that Curry might be the better pick over Moira. As well as if you're running more of a ranged comp, then her kunai damage can be pretty good as an additional way to maybe dink a target, call them out for your team to focus them down, and go after them. Curie is just a solid generalist pick that can fit into almost any team comp, but she's not really that specialized, so usually other heroes are going to be a better fit for that team comp. Curie would fit well with a Zen comp, but right now it's Lucio or nothing almost all the time. They're putting chemicals into the water that are turning all of the support players into frogs. Truly frightening witchcraft is at work here. Next up, Illari, C tier. I have seen Illari work a single time this season. Not like I have seen her played much at all, but Illari just does not really seem to fit into the mold of either a dive or brawl comp that are meta right now. Even with her buffs, I still don't think that she will be played much. Pylon is a big part of her kit, and while they reduce the cooldown for moving it and getting it back after it has been destroyed, it's still going to be very easy to destroy it just due to the projectile size buff. Since while all heroes got more health to kind of offset the projectile buffs, and the DPS passive, placeable objects like Torb Turret and Illari Pylon didn't get any kind of health buff, so they will be easier to hit even if you try and hide them somewhere behind cover. This more so impacts Illari's pylon though, since you can stick it to surfaces, which opens up a lot more places to hide it. But again, projectile size buffs, it's just going to be much easier to break it, even if you can only see a small part of it exposed. In addition, Illari lost her 2-tap, which is a pretty big nerf for her in particular, as she has a very slow fire rate for her primary fire. She's also just not that great against either dive or brawl comps, because they just play way too fast. I do think that she will be very good in, you know, off-meta comps if the other team is not playing, you know, hard, fast Lucio comps or a dive comp, then she will be pretty damn good. Just because even though she can't 2-tap, she's going to be able to farm up her ultimate very quickly, and her ultimate is really good. Still kind of gets hard fucked by KarQ Suzu, which I think is another reason why Illari isn't that great. But I've seen like a lot of fights get won just with a single Illari ult that was able to get through and basically just wipe an entire team. But just kind of the meta. The game is way too fast to really get value out of Pylon, and even though they did reduce the cooldown for it being destroyed, if it does get destroyed, it's basically going to be gone for the entire fight. I just do not think that she's going to be that great. I think that still be amazing if they ever, you know, nerf dive characters for some reason, or nerf Lucio. If the meta ends up being a bit slower, I think that she will be a much better pick, but for right now, not really. Next, Brig-yeet. Brig is not that good right now. I'd put her around B tier. B for Brig-yeet, and also for Baguette. How are these things related? I don't know. We'll never know. Back to Brig. Brig just kind of gets run over by fast comps, which, as I've mentioned 30 times, are extremely common right now. Lucio is basically our king. Everyone is just peasants groveling at his feet, but Brig excelled by enabling DPS plays by tossing armor packs onto them to give them sustain during a fight. This is kind of why Brig was like the best support in the game for like the last few seasons, because armor pack was just incredibly strong. Brig could also be very survivable on her own, assuming that she's only having to deal with, you know, one character trying to get after her. She can zone characters and play for her life pretty well. Again, she can also peel for allies using armor packs again. Just chuck a bunch of armor packs onto them. And this is made a bit worse with the introduction of the DPS passive. Repair packs are not as potent as they were before, but they're still very good. The thing is that a lot of the meta is just hard focusing down a target with dive, which repair packs don't really help that much against. They provide good sustained healing during a fight because you just toss them onto someone, gives them a quick burst of 25, and then heals 50 per second for 2 seconds. Now with the DPS passive, that 50 is being reduced down to 40, and also usually with dive comps you're gonna have multiple people focusing down a target. The repair pack just is not going to be able to do anything. Or with, you know, Junker Queen comps, Junker Queen's gonna knife someone in and the whole team just blows them up. It's a lot of really fast comps that rely on focus fire to just burn a target into oblivion, which is made even easier with, you know, DPS passive reducing peel. Brig does just mainly suffer right now because the game is extremely fast, and Brig herself is very easy to just get run over and focused down by dive and brawl comps. That was kind of the one major weakness of Brig, is that while she counters dive, she counters it by peeling for her allies and making it hard to dive them. Brig herself is surprisingly diveable for the most part because she can't really do anything about it. She can't repair pack herself. She can just kind of try and run away. If she gets whipshot on a target, then she's able to, you know, get rid of one of them. Use Shield Bass more for movement than for damage and try and get away. Like, she could zone pretty well, but a lot of the time she's still just going to get run over, especially if you are running a full focused dive comp or team composition that can just go on top of her. I will say that the one exception seems to be if you're running a Brig Zen comp, which I think could still be very strong, since if the other team does try to focus the Zen, you could help peel for him with repair packs, maybe boop a target off of him with whipshot, and try and keep him alive, while Zen himself could maybe actually fight through everything with the support and his naturally high damage output. So Brig could possibly do a pretty good job peeling for a Zenyatta in that case. And then if you were to try and dive the Brig and focus her down, then the Zenyatta would just kind of be free to do whatever he wants uncontested, which again also is a bit of a problem to deal with. Like, Brig just kind of, you know, is an aggro tank in a Brig Zen comp, kind of. That's what it feels like a lot of the time, where she can play for her life pretty good, zone pretty good, but is still susceptible to just being run over if, you know, something goes wrong. It also doesn't help that, you know, higher health totals are making getting kills as Brig much harder, so she can't fight off people as easily as she could before. Again, just making her even more susceptible to dying to dive comps and faster brawl comps. But I think that she could still work sometimes, especially if the team you're fighting against is very unorganized, then she could still zone off a single target. She's still going to be fine against a single aggressor, but against a whole team just running into her and holding down buttons, she's just going to die. She's gonna disappear faster than my dad did after he found out that we were out of milk. I still miss him. Anyways, Baptiste. I think that Bap is still pretty good right now. A tier. Immortality field is still really good. It just straight up prevents you from dying, so it's going to be really good against the DPS passive because the DPS passive doesn't really do anything to it. On top of that, you know, Tracer is very common. Immortality field is going to be very strong against a solo Tracer that's trying to get you in a lot of cases and give you a chance to fight back. Regen Burst is still going to be a decent burst heal and self-heal option despite the presence of the DPS passive making healing worse. Bap's problem is that he's still not going to be great with or against the Lucio comps because he doesn't really have the escapability that other heroes like Moira or KarQ have, but against non-Lucio comps he will be pretty strong. Bap is probably one of the heroes that got the most out of the projectile buff, as he has some of the worst recoil in the game on his primary fire burst, so that's going to be a good deal easier to use. He's still going to have good AoE heals, so he can work with a lot of brawl comps like he did before. The biggest thing is just the lack of mobility to get away from Tracer, who is easily the strongest DPS in the game right now, does set him back a bit. I mean, he can jump up in the air, but realistically, unless there's some high ground conveniently nearby that he can get to and try and hide from the Tracer, it's not going to really help him that much, aside from, you know, using Immortality Field, but then it just gets broken and then he'll be focused down soon after. Unless you know your team is going to come back and peel for you, or you can kill the Tracer yourself. But that's just talking about, you know, a solo Tracer. If you're getting focused down by a team of people, you kind of need the mobility and escape options that heroes like Moira or KarQ have. I will say he's one of the more map-dependent heroes in the game, because if there is really good high ground, then that can help protect you from the Tracer, as Tracer does not have vertical mobility, he just has incredibly good horizontal mobility, so being on good high ground can make it difficult for the Tracer to get to you, and I feel like Bap could maybe fight off, you know, a solo Winston or a Ball pretty decently on his own, and again, Immortality Field will buy him some time for his team to try and come back and peel for him, and get whoever is trying to kill him off of him so that he can not die. But again, you're still relying on your teammates to do that. Maybe they're not in the right position to do though. Maybe they're not fast enough. Maybe they just don't care, or just don't even know. Maybe they're playing with their monitors turned off and they just don't know that you're dying and they don't care to help you. You're probably just better off, you know, playing Moira. Fade away, healing orb yourself to just have a ton of sustained healing even if they chase after you. Or KarQ, just use Swift Step and hope that the enemy team doesn't notice which ally you teleported to and just hunt you down and kill you. But I do feel like out of all the supports, he's probably one of the better ones to pick right now. And then finally, for the last support, Ana. Yeah, Ana kind of sucks right now. Probably like C tier, maybe even D. With all the Season 9 changes, Ana has actually lost a lot. Her primary is now a 4-tap. Her healing was the highest in the game, meaning it has been hit the most by the DPS passive reducing healing. Her Biotic Grenade didn't really get worse in terms of power level, but Ana has lost her monopoly over effects that reduce healing with the introduction of the DPS passive. So now Ana isn't going to be as required against sustained comps that run, you know, a Roadhog or a Mauga, because the DPS passive is already going to be doing a pretty good job already of just stopping those heroes from being able to heal through everything. And if you really did want to counter some of those heroes, Zenyatta's Discord Orb would probably be a better option, so that you can stack the reduced healing and the increased damage on that target together from both the DPS passive and Discord Orb. In addition, Sleep Dart has also been hit as well, as because of the higher health totals that heroes have, confirming kills off of a Sleep Dart is going to be a bit harder than it was before. Not impossible, especially if your team focuses them down, but especially if Ana is alone and nobody on your team cares to come back to help you try and confirm the kill on a slept target, which is, you know, incredibly common in Overwatch 2. It's just going to be a bit harder to actually confirm the kill on a slept target. Again, a lot of the most popular heroes right now either have really good mobility that they can just get away after you fail to confirm the kill on them alone, or if it's like a tracer, they just like recall and get all of their health back. In addition to that, the support passive has again technically been nerfed again in terms of how long it takes for the healing to go into effect, going from the old time of 1.5 seconds to 2.5 seconds, which does affect Ana a lot more than the other supports in the game, as aside from the support passive, Ana's only way to heal herself is to use Biotic Grenade, which is not really a good play to make. It's one of your most important playmaking tools. Baptiste can kind of get away with it because he still has Regen Burst, which, while really strong, was not his primary tool to make plays with. That was more Immortality Field. And again, while the health restored has been increased from 15 to 20 health per second, I think that especially if you're trying to get away from a target, the faster activation would be more important than the little bit of extra health per second, because usually the support passive is not going to be the only thing you rely on unless you've only taken a small amount of damage. Usually it's just a stopgap for you to, you know, heal back a little bit before you're able to get to a health pack if you're really low. Because if you're really low, you're usually not going to want to risk staying in the open and relying on the healing passive, just because if anyone shows up, they just kill you in 2 seconds because you were just exposed in the open with very low health. If you're missing only 50, then you can just wait to heal it off, which the faster activation would be better than the slightly higher healing. And if you were very low, you're going to want to just go grab a small health pack because you still need the extra healing before you can really do anything in the fight again. The support passive just makes it so that you can just go grab a small health pack and then rely on the passive to do the rest of the work, instead of having to go find a mega or, you know, find 2 small health packs, or, you know, find your other support to finish healing you up. I don't know what I'm yapping about now, but the point is that I think that the support passive having the time increased due to the changes with the global healing passive being in the game, I think it impacts Ana a lot more than it does other supports. Zenyatta I don't think it really impacts at all because he had the sealed health, and then most other supports in the game have ways to heal themselves or have, you know, really good mobility to get them out of combat. Well, Ana really has none of that. Ana like took minor bullets everywhere. I feel like not a lot of people were thinking about Ana as being like a big victim per se of the Season 9 update, but when you think about it, she took like minor cuts basically everywhere in her kit. And I feel like that's one of the big reasons why she's going to feel so bad right now. So yeah, I think that's it for this tier list. Thank you very much for watching. I feel like it was pretty agreeable for the most part. Again, it's hard to give some heroes an actual spot on the tier list because I basically have only seen them get played like a few times. But the more important thing is that tier lists are kind of really subjective. A lot of this was built off of the assumption that, you know, Tracer is basically going to be picked in every single game you play, or that you're going to be playing with or against a brawl comp with Lucio or some kind of dive comp, and that's kind of how this tier list is constructed. If people are playing off meta, then, you know, stuff is very different. Off meta, I think that Mercy becomes much better if, you know, hard Lucio dive brawl is not being played. Or if you know the other team doesn't have a Tracer, or a Genji, or maybe even Echo has pretty good mobility, and has also benefited a lot from the projectile buffs. Kind of the same with Brig. I think that C also gets much better if the other team is not running a lot of these very fast meta-defining heroes, but like, they are the fast meta-defining heroes. They're basically going to be played a majority of the time. So yeah, I'll quit yapping for now. Next video, hopefully now I can have a better upload schedule of maybe at least once a week. But this was just Overwatch time. Next video just focusing more on channel update and lore. So yeah, until next time, Thank you for watching, like and subscribe. Until next time, live.